Hey guys! Part 4 of What If Naruto Lives in a Post-Apocalyptic World. Naruto was not prepared for it. No one was. No one was prepared for the great rock which fell from the heavens. When it crashed into the earth, the countdown had begun. The countdown to the end of the world. Having beaten Sabaku no Gaara, Naruto would wake up and find that the world he knew, the world of Shinobi, had passed away. Now he had to survive this world. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 7. Naruto groaned as he opened his eyes. He heard fighting. It was loud, painstakingly loud. The ground shook like a mighty earthquake and the skies ruptured with thunder. He leaned up and gasped when he saw hundreds, if not thousands of men and women in the elemental nations. They all fought each other like madmen. Some laid on the ground, their heads separated from their bodies, others laid strewn about like carpeted sinew. The Kyuubi leaned up. He yelled, but his voice was drowned out in the violence. Steel met bone, kunai met shuriken, the sparks of metal seemed like wild streaks of light in the air. The young genin looked left and right. He felt like he was watching a movie of some kind. It would have been a damn good one if it weren't happening right in front of him. The blonde shivered when he heard a man scream as his head was lodged off by another. Conquer the wastelands. Our God rides with us. Our God shall usher in the new elemental nations. We are the survivors of 9. Someone hollered over the chorus of screams, death, and violence. We are the survivors of 9. Men and women hollered as they charged into their enemies. Their speed was impressive, and so were their punches. What astounded the blonde the most was their use of jutsu. They were all using jutsu. Katon, Suiton, Raiton, Doton, Futon, every nature was being wielded with overwhelming force. The opposing team's use of jutsu was devastatingly scary. It was like they were in a class of their own. The defending side also had jutsu, but theirs were clearly no match for the opposing warriors. The Kyuubi watched a katon jutsu burn the skin off some defending men and women as they could only scream and accept their fate. Once Naruto got up, he tried to grab someone's shoulder, but he phased right through them. What the, he thought. He tried to grab someone else, but the result was no different. He was not allowed to interfere. He could only watch as flaming arrows, explosion kunai, and earth-altering shinobi techniques tore the wasteland asunder. However, that wasn't what shook the blonde the most. No, what utterly baffled him was some of the more powerful or seasoned shinobi were riding atop bone crawlers. Hell, some of them were riding on flying beasts he'd never even seen before. Like the bone crawlers, they didn't have eyes. They also had no legs. Large, black, bat-like wings spread from their arms as their mouth curved like some type of bear with sharp teeth. Two long, stringy tails flowed behind them. These flying beasts screeched as another shouted, "We are God's chosen. We shall bring the elemental nations into new glory," she cried before she unleashed a devastating wind jutsu. A spray of blood splashed on Naruto's face while birds and ravenous flocks devoured corpses. Whatever battle was going on here, Naruto only knew that it wouldn't be long before it was over. He wished he wasn't right. The battle ended. The opposing forces won. Some settlement in the middle of nowhere roasted in flames while men and women who surrendered were dragged out. They were bound and captured while the opposing force reveled in their victory. Then, everyone turned quiet. Their sudden silence unnerved Naruto. Why did they stop? He noticed the prisoners whimpering and sobbing. Some fathers held their wives and children. Some mothers held their sons or daughters. Others held whatever material possession was precious to them. A man stepped forward. Naruto couldn't see his face. It was covered in a large mask. He only noticed that there was some gray hair on his head. It was a little hard to make out from the dust of the battlefield. "Make them bow. They will soon be in the presence of God," he exclaimed. A few passionate followers did just that. They made their captives bow. Their hands on their heads, they shoved their prisoners' faces into the hot, beaten dirt. Naruto clenched his fists, but something kept him in place. Something told him to watch, to observe, to learn, to witness. The ground shook. 1 step. 2 steps. 3 steps. 4 steps. He turned to his right. From the dusty barren lands that were once filled with luscious trees, one of the biggest bone crawlers he'd ever seen appeared. It was at least as tall as the hotel complex he fought the other 7 in. The blonde dropped to his knees. Could they always get that big? He didn't even know if he could overcome it if he used his all. He turned his head. The men and women bowed. Some prostrated themselves while others bent down on one knee. Either way, they all held their gazes to the ground. As the big bone crawler came into view, Naruto saw it slowly rest its head down. That's when he realized it wasn't what they were all bowing for. It was simply carrying whatever they were bowing to. He then saw 2 women land in the sand. He could tell by the way their bodies curved, but there was too much sand and wind to see either's face. Either that or, maybe this dream didn't want him to see them. Both women bowed. Unlike them, unlike everyone else, he could clearly see who dropped. It was a man. He was tall. He looked a bit smaller than someone of Kakashi's height, but definitely taller than someone like I am. His steps were calm, precise, and measured. He walked with grace and an air of unboastful authority. Even Naruto wondered if he was out of place being the only one standing. The man walked before his audience. As his face came into view, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki widened his eyes and fell back so far his ass hit the ground. Blonde hair, 3 whisker marks on each cheek, a clear-cut face, and eyes glowing with green chakra. Was that him? But he was right here. How could that be him? Arise, he said, his voice no longer than an indoor voice. Everyone looked up and stood up. You've all done well. I couldn't be more proud. Continue to serve me and I'll rule this world. I'll change all of you, you all will live in my world. I will lead you. You will follow me. I am your God. You are my people, Databeo, he said. We are your people. You are our God, Uzumaki Naruto-sama, they chorused. Then, Naruto found his eyes linked with the one who had just spoken. His eyes blazed with the same green chakra as his own. No, that was wrong. His was much stronger. So strong was it that even the young Naruto fell to his knees. Indeed. You are their God. They will be your people. You shall rule the earth. Yes, you are a survivor. Was this not your dream? I have fulfilled it for you. Make use of me, Uzumaki Naruto. For that is your right. A voice said before his vision blanked out. Naruto gasped heavily as he opened his eyes. He looked left. He looked right. Everything was quiet. The sound of Ayam's breath on his neck calmed him. He was back in the tunnels. The creaking sound of metal was familiar to him. The young genin touched his forehead and exhaled. He was sweating. What was that? He thought. It was a dream, but it felt so real. Naruto rolled over and grabbed some water. It quenched his thirst with it and threw the bottle away. He'd pick it up later. In the meantime, he felt Ayam pull him closer to her as his mind replayed the events of that dream. He tried to think about it, but doing so only made his head hurt. Whether fortunately or unfortunately, his body remembered how tired it was and he fell back asleep about half an hour later. The green chakra slowly expelled from his body and floated through the air before it sucked itself back into his body. The next few days passed by in something of a blur for Naruto. He constantly thought about the dream, but he didn't remember the finer details of it. After some time, he just decided to treat it as that, a dream and nothing more. Meanwhile, Tenten, Shino, and Kosuke tested going outside the next morning. All 3 were astounded when they felt the hot sand on their face. Yet they were also disheartened when they saw the state of Konoha. There didn't seem to be anything left anywhere. Just a wasteland of buildings and structures being covered by hills and dunes of sand. That reminded them of what Naruto said. Perhaps they should leave the village behind. Meanwhile, Kurenai, after 2 months, was finally healed and refreshed. As soon as she was cleared by Kosuke, herself, and Naruto, she threw herself into her training. The Jonin and Eternal Genin then began working everyone as hard as they could. Many hours were spent in pain for Tenten, Shino, and I am. However, either shinobi could tell what to expect from Naruto. Either the blonde had been a late bloomer, or he just never had the right teacher. The genin was amazing. He took to their training well. His control over his green chakra, though nothing worth too much notice, increased. Every battle strategy and lesson they taught him, he remembered with expert precision. Hell, Kurenai thought she was facing a mind reader sometimes. Naruto almost seemed to know what she would do before she did. It was actually rather creepy. Even when she and Kosuke teamed up against him, his mind's ability to adapt was inhuman. One day, they'd beat him in under a minute. The next day would be 2 minutes. The next 5 minutes. The next 10 minutes. It got harder and harder. Hell, it seemed like his battle sense was overtaking theirs. They actually needed him to hold back because they feared his strength would collapse the tunnels. They knew this green chakra or whatever he had was stimulating the nerves of his brain. He always had a massive headache after they finished their training. Of course, he was still that same simple boy who couldn't handle complicated words. However, once he understood something, he worked out at least 20 different strategies or thoughts for it. Of course, with the knowledge that everyone could go outside, that led to today's meeting. Everyone gathered around the table while Naruto pulled open a large map. One of the flaming barrels was brought over for light and warmth. Tenten, how good are you at making weapons? Naruto asked. The kunoichi of Team Guy frowned. Look, just because I collect and use weapons doesn't mean I know how to make them, well. I took some forging classes in my downtime, but I could if I put my mind to it. Why? She asked. Naruto took out a shuriken and a kunai. He placed both on the table. These aren't tough enough to fight the bone crawlers. Even trying to pierce them with a kunai broke it to pieces, he told them. I stood up. Naruto-kun's right. When I fought one, it only clanged off its skin until I found its weak point around the neck. If even Naruto-kun can't puncture them, then we can't either, she stated. Naruto placed the kunai away. For now, we'll just have to avoid them. They could somehow sense I am even through all the chakra I released. If they can get to her, then they can get to you guys. Yeah, we've got some tags and other shinobi equipment, but it might not be long before those run out. Which is why we'll need to be careful of how we use these, he suggested. The others agreed. Indeed. These creatures could be anywhere. We have no idea how the landscape has changed in these times. These could be valuable materials, Kosuke replied. Tenten sighed and tapped the table. Who would have thought her giving up on those damn blacksmith classes would come to bite her in the ass? Alright, well, if I can find this list of stuff that blacksmiths use, then I can try my hand at it. Can't say it'll be Ambu quality, however, she said as she wrote down on a piece of paper. Meanwhile, Shino took this time to speak. Unfortunately, Naruto's the only one who can face them reliably. He said they only used to stay in the Shinobi district until a few days ago. Either they've started expanding from where they live, or something drove them to our side, Tenten finished. Shino nodded while Naruto sat back in his chair. Kurenai pulled out the map Naruto had been using and placed it on the table. So if they're over here, then what if we try a simple diversion tactic? There's something about Naruto that won't make them attack him first. Even when he met them the first time, they didn't attack him. If he enters their territory, then maybe that will keep them distracted while the rest of us search. These are akin to animals. They will investigate and defend their territory when it gets invaded, Kurenai suggested. I stood up. You want us to use Naruto-kun as bait? How do we even know they'll act like that? We're sending our only defense against them right into their part of the village? What's to say they don't ignore him and come straight for us anyway? She questioned heatedly. The ramen waitress couldn't lose Naruto. He was all she had left. He won't be going alone. I'll be going with him, Kurenai replied. Kosuke's smile faltered. You think they'll have a reason to go after you too if one of us is with him? It's possible that they went after Ayame because they didn't think she was with Naruto. Perhaps they desired the quick and easy meal instead of the fight they got. You could both be overwhelmed. You've also just recently healed, Kurenai. You should think this over carefully, he urged. Kurenai shook her head. There's not much to think over. This is a chance for the three of you to explore the village and get used to the way the world's changed. Ayam is the next person to protect the shelter. We can't leave it unguarded no matter what happens. We'll use the radio headsets, but we'll have to be careful. They're running out of battery. We'll have to get more, and the most powerful ones are in the Shinobi district, she returned. Ayam frowned. Then I'll go with him. I've already fought one, she protested. A severely weakened one. We'll need to minimize risk. You've made great strides in your training, Ayam-san, but don't delude yourself. You're not on the level of Kosuke and me. You're just barely below Tenten and Shino, and they haven't properly trained in a month, Kurenai returned. Ayam clenched her fists. So what? She was just supposed to stay here like the helpless civilian while everyone else went out. How could she stand that? Thankfully, Naruto spoke. Exactly, Ayam-chan staying behind serves us a good point, he said. Everyone looked to their appointed leader. He unsealed a pair of binoculars. This'll be good for Ayam's scout training. While Kosuke, Tenten, and Shino scavenge in the civilian district, Kurenai-san and I will be in the Shinobi district. Ayam will be observing both areas. She'll have to alert us if these bone crawlers do more than we thought. If they do, then I'll get Kurenai-san out of the district and grab the others, he answered. Shino agreed. That does make sense, he replied. Tenten agreed as well. Ayam reluctantly agreed as well. She didn't really like it, but it was better than nothing, she figured. She grabbed the binoculars and one of the cheap radio headsets. All right, she said. With that, everyone cleaned the table. Everyone got dressed. Ayam sat on top of the Umbu headquarters with a tarp, chair, and her lunch. Tenten, Shino, and Kosuke grabbed their backpacks and stared out into the village. A quick check of the mics between Ayam, Naruto, and Kosuke was set. They worked fine and the three set off. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kurenai nodded. The former hugged the ramen waitress and set off from their base. Ayam waved him goodbye. However, she couldn't help a bad feeling in the pit of her stomach. She hoped it was just her nerves. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kurenai landed on a sandy rooftop. The winds had blown fierce. The rooftop was barely visible, slowly being consumed by the new world that had befallen them all. They stared at the Shinobi district. It looked like an absolute mess. Crushed buildings and towers of collected bones and skulls littered the ground. Naruto pulled up his face mask. Kurenai did the same. The sand kept getting in their mouths. Tell me, Naruto, what would you even need money for? If the other nations are like Konoha, then it won't be long before no one's gonna think about that anymore, the Jonin said. The blonde frowned. It's because we don't know what the others are like. Besides, when people kill for the stuff, it becomes valuable no matter how broken the earth gets. In the case that we don't need it, then it's good fire fuel, he replied. The Genjutsu mistress thought on his words, but she didn't reply. The two set off again. This time, they landed on another rooftop. The Shinobi district was about 10 minutes away. They looked down to its roads. It's too quiet, he said with a frown. Are they usually out around this time? She asked. She shivered when the blonde nodded. He told her of when he observed them. He left no minor detail unspoken. That concerned Kurenai greatly. For what reason would they stop coming now? Ayam-chan, do you see anything? Naruto asked into his mic. Nothing so far. Konoha's barren of any movement. Something wrong? She asked. No, I guess it's just nerves, he said before he and Kurenai moved again. The two shinobi ran fast, but Naruto made sure that their speed wouldn't make the Jonin winded. Strong though she was, he'd rather not tax her body needlessly. 10 minutes passed. The two landed on another rooftop. This time, it was one in the Shinobi district. They landed silently, almost fearful of what would happen if they made too much noise. From the way Naruto saw it, they had landed on another apartment complex. It was probably one for the Jonin and Chunin in the area. Just like everything else, its windows were busted open. The door was blown off its hinges. Unfortunately, this wasn't their objective. I remember this street. If it hasn't fallen, then there should be a shinobi shop to the east, Kurenai said, pointing them one way. Naruto frowned. He quickly checked with Kosuke and the others. Apparently, they saw and heard nothing as well. This made the blonde even more anxious. Should he call off the operation? Something told him yes, but something else told him no. The young genin channeled the green chakra to his eyes and scanned the area. Kurenai, again, felt that mysterious, powerful chakra rush through her body. She tried to steady herself while Naruto looked over the area. There was nothing. He could oddly make out the chakra signature of the thing at the Chunin exam stadium. However, beyond that, he couldn't see the trail of green chakra between himself and the bone crawlers. The blonde released the chakra. "Let's go," he said. The Genjutsu mistress agreed and they landed on the ground. Kurenai slowly took in what had become of her village. An amalgamation of death, despair, and carnage ravaged the entire place. The sand beneath her feet, once a walkway road, felt hot and dry. This was where Naruto found Hinata's bodiless head. A deep scar ran through the ground like a devouring monster. If that was the earthquake, then Hinata's head most likely got crushed by the debris down there. The black-haired woman inhaled and exhaled. Everything seemed so quiet and unsettling. The only sound being Naruto's voice over the mic. "Nothing yet. I must admit, aside from the torn-down buildings, dunes of sand, and natural tornadoes, it's a little peaceful," I.M. said. "Indeed. It's very quiet. It's like a ghost town," Kosuke replied over his line. Naruto felt a shiver run up his spine but tried to ignore it. The shinobi shop appeared in front of them. Just like everything else, it too seemed to be on the verge of crashing down. "We should be careful. It looks unsteady," Kurenai said. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki agreed. A pillar had fallen in front of the door, blocking its entrance. Naruto pulled it up and allowed Kurenai to enter first. She thanked him and ducked beneath the pillar. He dropped it, and they looked through the store. This one looked a bit cleaner than the others Naruto visited. When they stepped inside, the glass crunched beneath their feet. Kurenai kicked some wood to the side while Naruto surveyed the destruction. "You gather all the things down here. I'll get the stuff upstairs," he said. "All right, be careful," Kurenai replied. As Naruto journeyed up the stairs, he turned back to her. "I should be telling you that, Databayo," he remarked, which made her laugh before he disappeared. While Kurenai worked below, Naruto worked above. Clearly, a store like this had more than one level for shinobi-grade materials. Time seemed to roll by as they picked the place clean. Both worked hard while the latter sealed up the materials and scrolls. Anything that they could get, they got. Naruto got a few more masks for the rest of the group as well as some training dummies. Apparently, they sell those as well. Who knew? The blonde gawked when he looked at one of the rakes. "They even sell wooden logs," he said to himself. Granted, the wood didn't look as clean or freshly carved as before, but it was free, so he took those as well. They also grabbed plenty of extra radios, enough for at least 20 or 30 people. Naruto just finished sealing up some rope when his mic turned on. "Naruto-kun, come in," I.M. said over the line. The duo stiffened while Naruto tabbed his headset. "Go ahead, I.M. Nichin." "What's up?" Naruto asked. There was silence for a moment. Suddenly, Naruto and Kurenai gasped as they heard a loud, thunderous boom. They quickly grabbed their things and ran out of the shinobi shop they'd been littering. As soon as they ran out, the quake brought the buildings to their knees, covering them in sand and other crushed materials. The Konoha walls to the western quadrant just collapsed. I.M. finished, her voice notably shaken from the ordeal. Both heard the crash of lightning. Trees were set on fire and fierce tornadoes connected with them. No matter where Naruto and his group were, they could all see the blazing fire tornado burning and crushing all through the village on the very far side. Kurenai widened her eyes and even she dropped to her knees. Every day, every single day, the horror was becoming a reality. Their home, their life was dying. Pretty soon, nothing would remain. No one would remain. How much more could Konoha stand? How much more could the buildings take without their people to protect them? Naruto and Kurenai wordlessly watched as the entire Hyuga compound swirled through the air. The estate, shops, and all the buildings associated with them caught on fire from the storms. Ancient scrolls and texts meant only for Hyuga eyes scattered themselves to the wind. The latter noticed the branch compound launch until it collided with the Uchiha compound. Another of the tornadoes crashed into each other, and became a deep blaze that would turn everything to cinders. It was still miles away from them, so they hoped they had nothing to fear, but the disaster hastened their efforts. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki and Lone Jonin scavenged from about 10 or 12 shops. They collected elemental scrolls, kunai and shuriken sets, mesh armor, books on chakra study, chakra control, and other advanced techniques. The duo grabbed blades, workbenches, and even managed to find some of the materials on Tenten's list. One of the shop owners must have been a blacksmith because Naruto found a working furnace in his basement. Yes, he sealed up an entire blacksmith's furnace area. Don't question it. Once they cleared out the block, both finally stood before the Konoha Bank. It was a large building, barely standing just like everything else. Truth be told, Naruto didn't really want to come here for the money itself. Sure, it would still have its value until about 5 or 6 months when the world would redefine its significance, but that wasn't his main goal. Never did I think I'd come to the Konoha Bank to rob it, Kurenai replied. They won't be using it anyway. We need it more, he said as he stepped through the busted windows. He landed inside. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki surveyed the bank. A mountain of unfleshed corpses lay scattered across the floor. Clearly, they weren't the first to come here. Some probably came here in the ensuing chaos during the start of the end. He kicked some glass out of the way. Though he tried to avoid it, he heard the crack of old bones that turned to dust. The distant echo of his steps rang in his ears. Naruto then heard Kurenai behind him. She stepped through as well. Both absently noticed the claw marks around the bank teller desks and bank walls. Be on your guard, Naruto. Remember your training, Kurenai said. The blonde didn't need to be told twice. He'd already begun moving the green chakra through his body. The two walked up one of the broken steps that led deeper into the building. We've loaded up. We're heading back home, Kosuke said. Got it, Naruto returned before he turned his mic down. Kurenai and the young genin walked carefully. The floor was old, the windows were broken, and the sound of harsh wind was outside. They also had to keep in mind that the storm was getting stronger. Both figured they might have to take what they could get and get out. After coming down a couple of halls, Naruto and Kurenai came up to the Konoha vault. One of the places meant to hold the money of every individual in Konoha, not counting the clans. Most of the clans had their own banks to handle their funds. However, as Naruto thought before, there was another reason he came here. Okay, how do we get it open? The vault is supposed to be guarded by great weight suppressant seals. It's also incredibly durable. I've heard that even the legendary Sannin Tsunade-sama would have trouble break. Kurenai was quickly cut off when she heard the walls crack and tear. She watched as Naruto grunted. He pulled the vault door away from the bank and tossed it to the side. It crashed into the wall with a loud, deafening thud. The Jonin blinked. What? Naruto dusted his hands off and smirked. When he pushed the green chakra into his eyes, he'd already seen the seals Kurenai was talking about. When he placed his hand on them, the green chakra moved into the seals and unlocked each of them, even the countermeasure ones. The blonde then pushed it into his arms and pulled the lock away from the door. Oh, it was heavy, he actually thought his arm would snap off. It was why he threw it away so quickly. Alright, let's get to work, Naruto said. He didn't want to stay here more than they needed. How did you? What just happened? Kurenai asked herself as she stared at the wide-open vault. She then looked at the door. Why? Why was that display of strength so interesting? Or rather, why was it so? Kurenai couldn't even find the words for it. Meanwhile, Naruto, unaware of Kurenai's plight, stared at the many locked drawers arranged like books on shelves. There was a desk with some chairs, and a rotting corpse. More than likely that was someone who did accounting of all the deposits. There was also a ladder going up to all the other deposit boxes. Naruto inhaled and exhaled. He offered a silent prayer to the deceased for what he was about to do. When he touched one box, the safety seal on its container came undone. He pulled the box out and opened it. Tons of cash filled up the box. He grabbed it and stuffed it in a box. Honestly, though he'd done illegal work before, Naruto never felt scummier. Silently, Kurenai watched Naruto work. She wasn't sure what she could exactly help with. It wasn't like she could undo complex seals just by touching them. Instead, she secured the perimeter, making sure nothing came that shouldn't be coming. While she did this, the Genjutsu mistress took the time to think on the enigma known as Uzumaki Naruto. Well, he was an orphan. He was the holder of the Kyuubi no Yoko, the demon that nearly destroyed Konoha 12 to 13 years ago. He was known as the dead last of the academy, barely passing to make genin. He was known to be brash, loudmouthed, rude, energetic, and quite the brawler. Despite those negative traits, he'd beaten her student Kiba. He'd also beaten Niji, Hinata's cousin. Considerable feats for someone like him. If one asked the Kurenai before all this started, then she would have been honest. She didn't know what Hinata saw in Naruto. Granted, she was the last person to talk about what it was to like someone. She always thought Hinata might go for the quiet type like herself. Then again, they say opposites attract. Over the months, she'd seen what Hinata saw. Despite being hated, the blonde worked hard. He chose not to define himself by what people defined him. He carved his own path. He had his own dreams. Even when people mocked him, he held on to what he believed. His charisma was infectious. It made Hinata fight where she might have given up. He showed ingenuity, creativeness, battle prowess, and intelligence most wouldn't see in a classroom. For a boy, he was also easy on the eyes. He had a rather rogue, untamed, wild persona when compared to a boy like Sasuke. Naruto was perhaps the bad boy in cheesy romance novels that the girl liked, while Sasuke was the cool, mysterious body girls drew to. That said, personally, Kurenai preferred the former. And not that she preferred Naruto. He was just a boy, if that. He was like Tiny Asuma sometimes. Yeah, that's a good comparison, Kurenai said to herself. She shook her head. She didn't know where these thoughts were coming from. Anyway, she'd reevaluated her entire opinion. No, that was wrong. She threw out all she thought Uzumaki Naruto was when this all started. Because he lived on his own, he was a survivor. He saved her. He was kind, caring, strong, heroic, dutiful, and studious. When she and Ayam caved beneath the weight of this new world, he stepped up and led them all safely. Sure, not all of his decisions she approved of, but he made sure everyone's voice was heard. He never complained in the training. He'd speak to her sometimes when she was sick with no one else around. He actually paid attention to her words and her lessons. To be honest, Kurenai didn't really know what Sakura didn't see in Naruto. Hell, if he were a couple years older, then even the Genjutsu mistress thought she might. What the hell? I wouldn't think this, the Jonin thought. Maybe she was more delirious than she thought. However, that did beg the question, why did she feel great power when Naruto spoke? Why was she so afraid of doing something that would potentially upset or displease him? When Tenten had lashed out with her spoken comment, Kurenai felt the rage boil within her so much that it surprised even her. She actually thought she might take the young Kunoichi's head off for disrespecting her god. Wait a minute. Wait, god? Kurenai thought. She shook her head. Maybe she shouldn't have come out today. She'd been having strange thoughts recently. 1 or 2 hours passed before Naruto returned with everything. A scroll full of almost all of Konoha's wealth, gold, jewels, and money. He handed it to Kurenai in a scroll. The Jonin sighed. In this one scroll, their group had become the richest people in Konoha. Well, not like that was worth anything now. Ready to go? Naruto asked. Kurenai placed the scroll away. Yeah. The Jonin was cut off. Both shinobi fell to the floor as the earth outside shook with more anger and fury than either had ever felt. The bank walls cracked and the roof caved in on itself. What sounded like the drums of 1,000 thunders through the sky. Naruto quickly grabbed Kurenai and pushed her against the side of a wall as the debris fell over them. This was way worse than the fissure he felt back when he'd entered the shinobi district the first time. And Naruto-kun! Naruto-kun, get out of there! Ayam screamed into his earpiece. Ayam Michin, what's going on? The blonde asked. Unfortunately, he didn't need to ask. He would get his answer soon enough when a loud, almost deafening roar pierced the air and shattered the glass outside. Through one of the open windows, Naruto and Kurenai gasped as they saw the sand rise up like a giant tidal wave. There was something out there. It roared like a great beast as its body towered high into the sky. It slammed back down and the sand crashed into every building around the Shinobi district. The Genjutsu mistress grabbed the young blonde's chest while he covered the top of her head. The ground continued shaking, buildings crashed down into each other. The thunderous, murderous, animalistic, horrific roar outside shook them both to their very core. It's a... Get in inside. Naruto-kun. You go to it, too, GWWWWWZZZZT. Just before the mic cut off, Naruto heard I scream as something exploded on her end of the line. Naruto widened his eyes. All he heard was static on the other line. Worry filled Naruto. The skies darkened, but it was too early for it to be night. The ground continued to rumble. Outside, both saw a mountain of sand, buildings clinging to it only to be cast down like falling stone. The sand grew taller and taller, almost like an obelisk before it sprouted a beast with 4 jaws. It roared before it slammed back down into the ground. It didn't have arms or legs that either could see. Its body was very linear and curved like that of a serpent. It slammed back into the ground, which caused a stone slab to crack over the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's shoulder. Arg! He groaned while Kurenai held him closer. Finally, the shaking stopped. The red-eyed Jonin coughed and waved some dust out of her face. When she looked up, she saw Naruto protected her from an entire collapsed room of debris. The side of his face bled while he looked at her. "Why, you alright?" he asked. "Why, yeah," she said. Naruto pushed some green chakra into his body and moved the heavy stuff he was holding off his arms. It fell to the floor with a hard thud. He then rolled over and leaned against the wall. He quickly checked his headset but snarled. It laid in his hands, snapped in two by something that must have struck him without him knowing. The young man tossed the broken headset and radio away before he grabbed another one from the scrolls they used. He placed it on his head and tuned the radio to the frequency they were all using. "I am Nichin, come in." "I am Nichin, do you read me?" Naruto asked, his patience growing thinner and thinner. There was nothing but static. Anger and rage filled Naruto's body. Worry grew on his face. Even now, the way the ground shifted beneath his feet made him shiver. Something must be blocking the signal. "For now, we have to get out of here," Kurenai suggested. Naruto leaned back and banged his head on the wall once. "Yeah, but move quietly. Something's out there. From the sound of it, it's not just one either," he told her. Kurenai agreed and the two slowly moved through the bank. The earthquake, if one could even call it that, had collapsed most of the bank. Bookshelves and tables blocked off other entrances or exits. Pillars and support beams fell on top of each other as Naruto ducked beneath one and Kurenai followed. The Jonin protected the Genin's flank. They stayed as close as they could to each other while they felt the darkness creep on top of them. The former wondered if her eyes were playing tricks on her because she saw the shadow of something more moving outside. She looked out the window and the sand moved like something was beneath it. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 somethings. They each moved around separate parts of the village. As Kurenai looked at her home, she was stunned. No, she was devastated. Everything, it was all gone. Only a handful of buildings remained standing. She could count them on all 10 of her fingers. Naruto saw it as well. It was then that he knew, never mind another month or 2. They couldn't stay even one more day. As soon as he got back to his group, they would all need to make plans to leave the village. They'd been in talks for a few days about what they would do or where they would go. Both silently watched the tremors beneath the sand. The wind knocked a tree over. It fell with a loud rumble, but that wasn't what terrified them both. As soon as the tree fell over, it was pulled beneath the sand by 3 large jaw-like appendages. After that, the only sound was that of the wind. When they looked at each other, Naruto placed a finger to his lips. He pointed for Kurenai to follow him. She agreed. They silently walked to the back of the bank and down into the basement. They flicked on their flashlights. Since there was no light the further they went down, the darker it got. So dusty was it that they had to wipe off their lights multiple times before they made it to the bottom level. They made it to the basement door for electrical work. Naruto tried to open the door, but it was locked. Kurenai kicked the door down and both went inside. Once they were inside, Naruto placed the door back up and put a large stone behind the door to keep it up. They sighed and fell to the ground. What even was that? Kurenai asked. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki shook his head. I don't know, but I am and the others are in trouble. We don't even know what's going on, Naruto answered. Then I guess our first step should be figuring that out. Perhaps we should rest here then head to the rooftops. That'll give us a visual of everything, the Jonin advised. Her genin leader agreed. They rested for a couple of minutes and tried to make it to the rooftops. Unfortunately, the way was caved in. Given how unstable the bank was, it wouldn't be long before it came crashing down. With that being the case, Naruto didn't charge headfirst and break the debris. Their plan was quickly thwarted and they went back to the basement. For a while, they decided to eat and drink their problems away, wallowing in the temporary satisfaction of the food they brought with them. While they ate, Naruto noticed something strange. The light of his torch casted an odd shadow behind a lone steel shelf that had been in the room with them. He got up and walked over to it. Kurenai watched him while he grabbed the shelf and pulled it to the side. The blonde frowned when he saw a giant hole which led into the dark. There's a hole here, Naruto said. Kurenai raised an eyebrow and walked over, a piece of her sandwich still in her mouth. Is it possible some people made it? She asked. The blonde shrugged. I guess, but look. There's slimy stuff on it, he said. He raised his hand and Kurenai grimaced at the long trail of gooey residue stuck to the genin's hand. He touched his hands together and pulled them apart. It's sticky. Hard too. It's like glue, only much harder. He growled before he released his chakra and broke his hands free. He panted while Kurenai investigated. She took some and moved it between her thumb and forefinger. So it's very adhesive. What could make this? Maybe it's your bone crawlers, she replied. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki turned his head. Was it them? It was possible, but the hole seemed much too big to handle their size. They could investigate, but Naruto really didn't feel like it. As it stood, they had to get out of here. He thought he might have to risk it and punch their way out and face whatever laid outside. However, the decision wasn't his to make. The bank suddenly groaned. Cracks lined the basement walls. The genin and jonin duo gawked as the entrance to the basement collapsed in stone and wood. It wouldn't be long until the bank collapsed as well. The two stared at the large hole. Kurenai did not like where this was gone. Hopefully, Naruto wouldn't say. Guess there's only one way to go, Databeo, he said before he grabbed his things and jumped into the hole. Damn it. Kurenai grabbed her backpack and jumped into the hole with Naruto. When she jumped down with him, the first thing the jonin noticed was just how slimy all of the walls were. However, unlike the hole they entered through, it wasn't so adhesive that they were stuck. It just clung to them like a warm, sticky blanket. Naruto turned on his flashlight. Where are we? Kurenai asked. The blonde shrugged. I guess beneath the bank. Didn't know there were tunnels down here. Either way, come on. We gotta find a way out of here, he said. Kurenai wholeheartedly agreed. The two shinobi walked through the damp cavern tunnels. Their steps echoed rather ominously. Their flashlights shined along the walls. The more they walked, the more uncertain and scared they got. The tunnels seemed almost like burrows. They twisted and turned unnaturally. The claw and teeth marks on the side, glazed in dried blood, the skulls and bones they passed. Kurenai couldn't help finding herself a little out of her element. She'd seen many terrifying things in her career as a kunoichi, but nothing like this. The tunnels rumbled. Panicked, Naruto and Kurenai turned out their flashlights. They waited in the darkness for a long time. The rumbling continued. It got closer. The Uzumaki heir didn't know why, but sweat started to pour down his face. There came growling, snarling, and digging. The densest green chakra Naruto had ever seen or felt came their way. Without thinking, Naruto pulled Kurenai down to him. He then covered her body with his own to make them as small as possible. The noise got closer. The rumbling got stronger. The passageways echo relentlessly. An intense wave of killing intent covered them both. As it got closer, Kurenai placed her head in Naruto's chest. Whether to keep herself from seeing that which mustn't be seen, or to help her shivering, she didn't know which. All she knew was that the long, narrow, suffocating tunnels moved without regard for how they felt. Naruto and Kurenai turned their heads. Even though it was dark, they could see the ginormous, slithering, crawling form of something burrowing past them. It gently roared as its grotesque body passed them by. It must not have seen them, for it had no eyes, but for some reason they could feel its gaze on them. The black-haired Jonin didn't know what she was feeling, but she unconsciously gripped Naruto so hard she tore some of his clothes. She shook like she was in the middle of the freezing cold. 3 jaws, each filled with slime, and over 24 rows of teeth lined each jaw. Like a Venus flytrap's open flap, the jaws wiggled and writhed like something out of the depths of hell. From its mouth about 15 feeler tentacles wrapped around the walls. Fear rushed through Naruto. It was just like back in the Chunin exam stadium, but this couldn't be that. It was much too big. If he faced something this big, then it shouldn't matter how hard he struggled. He would have been eaten if he tried to save Iam from this earlier. One of the feelers brushed against the wall inches from Kurenai's face. Naruto slowly, quietly, pulled her away. The feeler crawled along the stone walls. The beast in the shadows groaned. The sounds of its teeth clacked together like razor-sharp knives. A stone fell next to them and the feeler instantly moved toward it. The stone was next to Kurenai's hand, so she slowly moved it. Another stone fell. The Jonin could hear the genin's heartbeat. Both were pacing. Suddenly, there was a scream. Naruto recognized it as that of a distant bone crawler. The slithering beast roared and sped off as it dug through the underground labyrinth it most likely created. Once it was gone, Kurenai and Naruto slowly eased. Their breath was hot. Slowly, the latter pulled away from the former. He looked down the tunnel where the crawling beast just slithered. He tried to move, but Kurenai kept him locked tight. He looked down, and he saw the expression of pure terror on her face. Her fingers twitched against his shirt, while her breath came in raspy gasps. That chakra, it felt just like Naruto. Only it was much viler. It didn't offer the Genjutsu mistress a sense of comfort or relief. Instead, it was very dark, overpowering, vicious, and unforgiving. Though it was miles, nay worlds apart, she could only compare this feeling to when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. At that time, she'd been adamant to help, but now she cursed herself. Would she be like this when crunch time came? Quivering like a broken mess before the landscape that had changed her home so drastically? Kurenai-san, we gotta go, Naruto whispered, his hot voice tickling her ear. The Jonin slowly nodded and Naruto picked her up. It was clear that Kurenai had been shaken by what she saw. She was more alert, yes, but she was also more jittery. Perhaps it shouldn't have surprised the blonde. They were very deep underground, they didn't know where they were going, and they were surrounded by gigantic worm-like beasts with thousands of razor-sharp teeth. All the Jonin could rely on was her wit and Naruto. Sure, they had some shinobi supplies, but only he could unseal them to make use of them. While they walked, the two were constantly haunted by the screams. Naruto recognized them as the screams of the bone crawlers. He now knew why they hadn't appeared on the surface. They were being hunted. They were scattering themselves to the wind just as he and his group would do soon. In this world, the strong reigned and the weak suffered. Perhaps it was always that way. The strong of society trampled upon the weak of individuality. He'd seen that all his life. He realized that when he kicked the broken remains of a bone crawler into the dark void. He dared not turn on his flashlight, for he feared what would greet them if he did. Naruto slowly guided Kurenai through the tunnels for what seemed like hours. There were so many close calls, too many to count. The walls and floors were sticky with gooey residue. That made it hard to walk. Both nearly slipped off and fell to their deaths. It was only thanks to Naruto's chakra strength that he could pull them both up. For once in her life, Kurenai actually feared that she might die. The darkness was heavy, the sounds and pain of creatures hunting creatures were rampant. Naruto even began feeling the exoskeletons of squashed insects. Finally, Naruto stopped. They couldn't keep going like this. If they did, then he was sure they'd die. He said that because another giant worm-like creature dug its path just a few inches from him. The three young shinobi nodded and Naruto gave Ayame a quick hug. She hugged him back fiercely before the three exited the tent and dashed off as Kosuke, Kurenai, and the ramen waitress watched them leave. They quickly zipped up their tent and waited. Meanwhile, Naruto, Tenten, and Shino raced through the hot sand and rough terrain. Miles upon miles of nothingness spread as far as they could see. Truly, the sand proved to be challenging. It was hard to run on top of it without chakra. It was heavy, it didn't provide the best traction, and it made them slip sometimes. How the hell did Naruto run across it so smoothly? He actually had to stop multiple times just so they didn't lose him. After an hour of travel, the three made it over a rather large hill covered in sand. In the distance just below the valley, they could see the ruins of a large city. There was a massive palace-like structure in the middle of the city. Just like everything else, it too looked broken down and torn up. Nevertheless, it still retained some form of its splendor. Some areas appeared drowned in a sea of the sandstorm, but others laid free. In fact, it looked much better than Konoha did. Tenten pulled out her binoculars and scanned the city. I don't see anything, she said after about 5 minutes. Shino frowned. It doesn't mean nothing's there. Remember, we stayed close to Naruto for almost a whole month before we got to go outside. Whatever's affecting Naruto, it spread to us as well. We can't rule out the possibility that people are underground just like we were. We're also pretty far from Konoha. We don't know what else is out here, he replied. Tenten wasn't about to argue that logic. Yeah, so what should we do? The weapons mistress asked. Naruto thought about this for a moment. He channeled some chakra to his ears. He didn't hear anything down in the city. Aside from the occasional piece of wood floating in the distance, it was very quiet. A place like a daimyo's palace should have an underground passageway. It's the responsibility of the guards to keep him alive in case of enemy attack. Whether they've survived for these months, I don't know, but let's go down slowly. Package what you can if you can find it, he replied. The two former genin agreed. Everyone picked up their stuff and slid down the sand dunes. The Fire Country Palace got bigger and bigger while they neared its border walls. Some sections of the walls were broken down. If there were bodies here, then they must have already turned to dust. The three entered the city cautiously. It looked much like Konoha before the village was overrun with monsters, sand, and natural disasters. Broken homes, fallen shops, roads blocked up with debris, and dusty streets, that was all they saw. The sound of their footsteps sounded like drums in the vast void of nothingness. Naruto noted there was a pleasant breeze today. Alright, remember, we're not here to loot. If you find something nice then take it, but we're trying to find a suitable place to live even if it's for another month or two to plan our next move. Keep your headset active, Naruto ordered. Hi, Tenten and Shino said. For the next 2 or 3 hours, that was how the team of Naruto, Shino, and Tenten worked. They carefully inspected each building offered to them, but they found no place where they could settle down. Well, technically that wasn't true. Some places were secure for a day or two, but none had the parameters that Naruto wanted. Space, a good place to defend, and sturdy. There was a thought that maybe they'd have to build their own, but that required much more effort than the 6 of them had. In some of the homes, there was evidence that people lived there. A few beds, blankets, empty cups of food, and a few skeletons still not eroded away by time. One of them looked like a child. It was too small to be an adult, or so Naruto thought. Though this wasn't a looting day, Naruto at least grabbed a map of the Fire Daimyo Palace city. He quickly began writing down the important places for some food, but it was clear some of them had been looted. Drawers were opened, food was taken off shelves, and there weren't a lot of general supplies. Granted, this could be because of the intense weather disasters, but the Kyuubi Jinchuriki doubted it. When the three reconvened, Tenten and Shino shook their heads. People have been living in some of these houses, she said, vocalizing the thoughts of the entire group. Yes, it's obvious they've been on the surface. Perhaps the toxic air was something general to Konoha. Once we got used to it, it stopped affecting us. Maybe it didn't reach this far out, the Aburame heir said. Naruto frowned and stared at the abandoned city. So if there was nothing forcing them underground, where are they? The blonde asked ominously. Tenten and Shino had no answers for him. Unfortunately, he had no answers for them either. The three genin started at this ghost city that was once one of the most prominent places in Fire Country. Something felt very wrong with it. Naruto didn't like it. The blonde's two friends looked to him for leadership. He stared at some of the larger buildings. Most likely they were the hotel or motels in the area. The city definitely seemed more modern than what the Jinchuriki would expect for such a place. It wasn't as big as Konoha, but it would take more than a day to conquer it if it were invaded. He noticed a large building in the distance. It showed some signs of wear and tear, but it still seemed stable. Let's check that place out. If it's secure, we can eat lunch there. If not, we'll head out immediately. I want to look through the daimyo's palace, but let's not overreach. Something happened to this place, something different from Konoha, he suggested. The two agreed and they all raced towards a large building. Once they got to it, they stared at it. Busted windows laid on its frame with shattered glass most likely inside on the floor. It looked like some type of administrative building from the way cabinets, bookcases, and office tables laid broken in front of it. There were a few sheets of dusted paper flowing in the wind as well. I always wanted to visit the Fire Daimyo's city. I don't feel that way anymore, Tenten stated. Indeed, Shino said. Naruto walked up the building steps. His friends followed after him. When he touched one of the double doors, they all watched them crack. They broke from their hinges and crashed to the floor, knocking up tons of dust. The blonde coughed while he stepped inside. Shino and Tenten coughed as well. The latter of the three shivered when she looked around the building. Talk about creepy. She swallowed a feeling of doubt in her throat when she saw a spray of dried blood on the wall. The kunoichi also saw a decapitated skull in the corner of the room. And maybe we could not stay here? She asked. Naruto noted his friend's fear, but he continued looking around. He studied some claw marks that appeared on a wall. He channeled the green chakra to his ears and eyes. The building was kind of dark. Now that he could see a bit more clearly, he saw more claw marks on the ground. They looked much wider than the claw marks from the bone crawlers. Though those creatures could walk on all fours, they usually walk on their hind legs. Whatever did this, it wasn't them. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's ears didn't hear anything either. Aside from the howls of the wind through the windows, he didn't hear anything. No growl, no footsteps, no labored breathing. There was just nothing again. Of course, as the blonde remembered back from the Chunin exam stadium, that didn't mean there wasn't something out there in the darkness. Proceed carefully. Watch your sides, guys, he said. He took out a kunai. Tenten reached into her leg pouch and pulled out a kunai as well. Shino reached for one from his chest pouch. They stuck close to Naruto as they proceeded through the building. They slowly walked up the steps and into a long hallway. Naruto looked through the hallway and he saw more scratch marks. They were large, wide, and ominous. Wordlessly, he directed Shino and Tenten to separate rooms. Both nodded. The bug user grabbed one of the handles and slowly opened the door. He noticed no traps and checked inside. The female of the squad opened her own door. No traps for that side either. Meanwhile, Naruto scanned the rest of the area. Clear, Tenten whispered into her earpiece once she finished checking one of the rooms. Aside from a few broken file cabinets, shards of glass, and fallen folders, there was nothing inside. Me too, Shino called over the line. Guys, come here, Naruto said from his side. The tone in the blonde's voice worried the two shinobi. They quickly moved out of the rooms and met up with him. He'd gone into the biggest room. It was probably one of the executive offices. When they joined up with him, both shivered when they saw the corpse of a large beast thing in the middle of the room. What the? Tenten said as she looked at the bones of a beast that laid in the room. Shino stepped forward. The three watched a small bug fly through the open skull of the creature and out the window. The Aburame narrowed his eyes behind his glasses. I've never seen an insect like that before, he said. Tenten sighed. Go bug hunting later. What the heck is this thing? Some kind of lion? She asked. Naruto knelt down and looked at the arms of the skeleton. Not unless lions have freakishly long hands and arms, and 16 saber-shaped teeth, he said. He picked up one of the arms, but it quickly turned into sand. It fell through the blonde's fingers and down to the floor. The Uzumaki heir stood up. He looked at the bones of the creature in front of him. He channeled the chakra to his eyes. What? But it's dead. Why is there green chakra circulating through it? It's moving. What's it doing? Naruto thought. The green chakra, like tiny tendrils, punctured holes into the bones of the creature that just perished. The blonde quickly stopped observing. It was a little disturbing. He turned around. Let's find someplace else, he stated as he moved from the skeleton like it was about to jump up and attack them. Tenten sighed. Best suggestion I've heard all day, she said. She quickly left the room, but Naruto kept Shino back for a moment. The Aburame heir turned to his leader. They both stared at the skeleton. Shino, could an insect do this? The former genin asked. Shino's frown deepened. Yeah, but it would take hundreds, if not thousands of them. Just one couldn't do this. If one can, then I think we shouldn't even bother with this place. We should just move on, he replied. He then walked out after Tenten. Naruto turned back to the skeleton. He'd faced insects and bugs back in Konoha. The Kyuubi saved his life from them before he'd been overwhelmed. Yet, they never did anything like this. Was he just being stupid? He just saw one small mosquito-like bug fly from the damn skeleton. That proved nothing. However, the fact that the bones had the green chakra as well worried him. Slowly, he walked out of the room, never taking his eyes off the fleshless corpse of the creature that died. He turned back to it. No chances, Databeo, he said. He threw a kunai with an explosion tag into the room. He ran out of the building with the rest of his team. As soon as they exited, the executive office exploded in fire and debris. Naruto didn't bother turning around. His resolute stare told the other two young teens what happened. They didn't question him. Once their side trip was finished, the three former genin feasted on chips, sandwiches, and warm soda. Of course, the soda lost some of its natural goodness from how long they had it, but it was a welcome delight nonetheless. For their lunch, the three spoke of better times and where the future might lead them. Hours passed them by and the makings of a harsh sandstorm seemed to be over the horizon. It carried with it some dry thunderstorms. The winds would be strong enough to destroy their tents. That left Naruto with a growl and deep reluctance. He quickly found them a suitable place far from the admin building. It wasn't as stable as he wanted, but it would have to do. A thorough inspection later, the three young shinobi ran back to their base camps. Naruto asked for Kosuke and Kurenai to debrief him later. Everyone quickly packed up their tents. The blonde picked up Ayam into his arms, and they all ran to the daimyo palace city. The sandy winds got heavier. The group just barely made it into the royal city before a tornado of sand and loud thunderstorms rolled across the sky. Everyone ran inside the apartment complex Naruto, Shino, and Tenten found. Ayam and Kosuke placed up some covers over the windows, blankets on the ground, and put away the tents. After a quick inspection by Kurenai, everyone was allowed to relax finally as a deep drum of thunder rolled through the skies. Naruto unsealed 2 or 3 lanterns from the scroll and hanged them on the walls. He then unsealed the bathing tools. Thankfully, they still had tons of water and towels, but in this harsh environment, the thought of what they would do if the water ran out was prevalent. That said, that was neither here nor there for the moment. So Ayam, Kurenai, and Tenten gathered their bathing tools and moved to a far corner. The group had already established that for safety's sake, 2 women would bathe while the third stood guard. Then the third would bathe while the 2 stood guard. This wasn't doing out of concern against their male companions. Instead, this was done in case they got attacked and none of the guys were there to answer. Once the girls were done, the guys went next. Soon everyone was more relaxed. Naruto unsealed their food. Ayam made what she could in a pot over an electric stove. That was one thing about this city versus Konoha. Electricity still worked. That definitely provided a strong argument to stay here. Naruto quickly started recharging their headsets while everyone else ate their food. While they ate, Naruto, Tenten, and Shino gave a rundown of what they saw and what they all encountered. The storms outside shook everyone while the apartment complex creaked eerily. They continued talking. Alright, then I think Kosuke-san, Kurenai-san, and I will head into the Fire Daimyo Palace. If that place is clear or if survivors are even held up there, then that's a bonus. However, we should be cautious. We don't know what they'll do. Tenten, Shino, and I am Nichin will scout the area. However, if we meet more people, we don't tell them we have more of us, Naruto said. Why not? I am asked. Naruto sighed. I am Nichin, he said with a frown. People do stupid things when they're scared. The group settled into silence. Though Tenten and Shino didn't fully understand what the blonde meant, Kosuke, Kurenai, and Ayam had a fairly good idea of what he was saying. Wise assessment, Naruto-kun. No need to reveal all our cards if we don't need to. That said, Naruto-kun, don't inform them of your green chakra unless necessary. While it is a valuable tool which has kept us alive so far, I have no doubts what the Fire Daimyo will do if you reveal that you can combat these creatures, the Eternal Genin said. What do you mean? Wouldn't it be a good thing? Tenten asked. Kurenai slowly shook her head. Remember, the world is very much in a state of utter anarchy. Even the Fire Daimyo's power has been minimalized. To consolidate his power once again, he could use Naruto, she said. Shino pushed up his glasses. You mean if he learns about us, then he could force Naruto to reclaim not only his palace but also all of Fire Country. The Hokage and the Daimyo have always had a complex relationship. If the Fire Daimyo learns there's no Kage, much less unestablished order, he might try to rule through Konoha, the bug user said. Naruto exhaled. But you guys would be safe, he stated simply. Everyone shivered from the sincerity in his voice. Perhaps it wasn't wrong that he was their leader. Who else among them could have made such a thought? Well, we're all making these plans based on the assumption that he's alive. For now, let's confirm the situation at the palace. Once we do that, we won't reveal ourselves. We'll observe for a little while, Kurenai said. Everyone agreed. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki then asked for their attention. There actually is something else we can try that I haven't in a few weeks, he said. He then crossed his fingers. You're going to try that again? But all it does is cause you pain, Ayam said with great worry. Naruto chuckled. Wouldn't be the first time, he remarked. He then sighed. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called out. Everyone, perhaps even Naruto, was expecting the Kyuubi Jinchuriki to double over in pain. It happened all the time before. Yet none of them were ready for a puff of smoke to appear next to their leader. They all gasped when a perfect clone of the former genin appeared next to him. Naruto and his clone looked at each other. They moved their arms at the same time. They each threw a punch with perfect synchronization. Effortlessly, the blonde dispelled the clone. That was when the usual pain came. Surprisingly, it wasn't as bad as when he tried back in Konoha. In fact, it only lasted a couple of seconds before he laid on the ground, breathing heavily. Tenten quickly echoed everyone's thoughts. What? Why can you use jutsu now? She asked. Unfortunately, Naruto wasn't sure what answer he could give to satisfy her. I don't know. I just did what I normally do, he replied honestly. Kosuke quickly flipped through some hand signs for a simple D-rank katan jutsu. When he blew his lips, nothing came out. He tried again soon after, but it held to the same result. Even Kurenai tried. Tenten tried to connect chakra strings to her kunai. She got nothing. Shino even woke up his insects for a moment. They buzzed angrily with having no chakra to feast on. The Aburame air put them back to sleep. You've got to be kidding me. Now, Naruto's the only one who can do a jutsu? Tenten asked in frustration. She didn't want to be, but she had no idea what was going on here. Everything was just so damn confusing. Mariboshi scratched his chin. It seems that whatever was hindering Naruto-kun before isn't anymore. Naruto-kun, how many clones can you make? Kosuke asked. Well, I tried to make the usual 10. I only got 1, he answered. Kurenai and Kosuke stared at Naruto incredulously. The usual 10? Even that was too much for some Jonin-level shinobi. Alright. Well, that's definitely something we can't let anyone know. Arguably, your Kage Bunshin is the most useful skill in a world like this. Your ability to scout ahead, even with 1 clone and scavenge, makes you invaluable. Can you perform any other jutsu? He asked. Naruto stared at his palm. He bit his thumb and slammed the floor. Kuchios no jutsu, he said. Everyone gasped when there was a puff of smoke came, but no creature appeared from the summoning circle. The jutsu worked, but it also didn't work, she said. I see. We've been so focused on ourselves, we never stopped to consider what would happen to summons for summon contracts. What about an elemental jutsu, Naruto-kun? Kosuke asked. Naruto scratched his cheek. I don't know any elemental jutsu, he said embarrassingly. Kurenai and Kosuke sighed. Well, that wasn't too much of a surprise. Aside from some clans such as the Uchiha, most genin weren't taught elemental jutsu until well into their career. That said, it was rather odd for a student of Hatake Kakashi, the man said to have copied over 1,000 jutsu, to not know any of those techniques. It couldn't have been his chakra. Hell, Naruto, at least before all this mess started, had more chakra than Kurenai and Kosuke combined. Way more! The Eternal Genin gained a thoughtful look. Well, if you can use jutsu, then we'll start elemental training, he said. Genjutsu as well, Kurenai added in. Everyone chuckled while the genjutsu mistress blushed a bit. While she did wish to teach someone genjutsu, it wasn't simply because it was her preferred style. It did benefit them if he learned what he could from their group. Indeed. Now, Naruto-kun, unseal what you've procured from the Konoha shinobi stores. If Kami's with us, then we'll find what we need, Kosuke said. Naruto shrugged and unsealed all the things he and Kurenai got from the shinobi stores in another room. Kosuke and Kurenai searched through the equipment for a little bit and returned. They returned with a small sheet of paper. You needed paper? Ayam asked. Kurenai smiled. It's not just any paper, Ayam-san. This is called chakra paper. It helps shinobi identify which element their chakra most aligns to. I'm a little surprised we didn't try this much sooner. This paper is made from a special tree somewhere in the elemental nations. It's used because it's very sensitive to chakra. If you align to fire, then the paper will catch on fire and turn to ash. If water, then it'll become damp. Lightning, it will wrinkle. Wind, it will split in half. Earth, it'll turn to dirt and crumble away. Perhaps we'll find some understanding about Naruto's chakra from this, she said as she handed him the paper. Naruto grabbed it and stared at it quizzically. Sheesh, how come they don't give these out in the academy? He asked. Genin don't usually have the chakra for elemental jutsu anyway. Besides, it keeps you from trying to practice too many dangerous techniques without supervision. Can't practice what you don't know, Kosuke laughed out. Everyone watched Naruto channel his chakra in silence before Tenten turned to Kurenai. Can a shinobi have 2 or more affinities? She asked. The former Jonin nodded. It is possible. Rare, but possible. There is usually a primary element, and sometimes a sub-element. Naturally, anyone can learn all types of jutsu, but normally their affinity is much easier. Also, not many know this, but it's been studied by a few scientists that using your primary elemental affinity uses less chakra, she said. Tenten hummed while everyone turned back to Naruto. They gasped when the paper split in half. Wind, Shino stated. A very rare element for a shinobi from Konoha. We usually align to. Kosuke stopped as he, and everyone else, even Naruto, stared at the paper in a mixture of shock, uncertainty, and fear. Strands like wires shot from one half of the paper to the next. They pulled each other together and made the paper whole again. Then, the paper wrinkled with a tiny lightning current running through it. However, it still didn't stay that way. The paper unwrinkled itself, and then started to drip with water. After that, the water stopped. Next, the chakra paper turned to dirt. Everyone stared in utter bewilderment as the paper somehow grew itself back from the earth it had been turned into. It then bursted into a flame so high it nearly reached the ceiling. Whoa! Tenten gasped as she fell back. Shino did as well. Kosuke pulled Ayame back while Naruto and Kurenai stared into flames. Once everyone settled down, they stared at the large, bright flame. It was hot, but it was also very beautiful. It turned from its orange color to blue, then red, then black, then white, then pink, then violet, then green, then yellow. Every color in the world, some that the six-man group never even saw or imagined, danced in its flying body. The flame was beautiful, amazingly so. Some of the colors actually combined and swirled around to create new colors. Soon, the flames grew smaller and smaller until the paper turned to ashes. This time, it didn't pull itself back together. Everyone stared in utter silence between Naruto and the ashes in his hand. I don't think that was supposed to happen, Shino said. Naruto stared at his hands in shock. When he looked up, every eye was on him. Though they were not hateful or spiteful, those eyes were something he thought he'd never see again. Eyes that separated him from everyone else, eyes that told him he wasn't the same as everyone else. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki stepped back from the group. He then turned and walked out of the room. He closed the door behind him. If nothing else, at least he wouldn't have to see those eyes anymore. The rest of the night went back without incident. Naruto returned to his assigned room. He stared at his hands. Damn it, why him? Why couldn't he be the damn normal one for a change? Why'd everyone have to look at him like he was some kind of freak? Kyuuso! Naruto growled as he slammed his fist into the wall. He shivered when he felt the building rumble. When he stared at what he'd done, he saw the cracks and splinters which lined the impact on the wall up to the ceiling. The former genin dropped to his knees. Kyuubi, what's going on with me? Naruto asked in a moment of vulnerability. He received no response. His sadness slowly turned to anger. Damn it, what's wrong with me? You're a damn fox who's lived for over 1,000 years, right? Say something! Naruto exploded in his own thoughts. Finally, the Kyuubi answered. I don't know, he answered without anger in his voice. In fact, the great fox sounded even more confused and concerned than his host. I don't know. Naruto wanted to be angry. He wanted to be very angry. Yet, he didn't know who he was supposed to be angry at. Instead, he just kept his mouth shut. This damn world. This fucking hellhole of a world that changed him. Maybe that's what he'd be angry at. People might think he didn't notice, but he did. The stairs had slowly started changing as he began his shinobi career. Some were still harsh, but they were changing. Now, it felt like he was back at square one. All of that, even though it wasn't his fault. With his heart heavy, Naruto just climbed into bed. He pulled the sheets over his body and closed his eyes. About 2 minutes later, a knock came on his door. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Ayame asked from the other side. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki didn't respond. Instead, he turned out his light and closed his eyes. He really didn't want to see anyone right now. One more series of knocks came, but the blonde ignored them. After a moment, he heard steps fade away down the hall. Naruto closed his eyes and went to sleep. The sounds of the sandstorm outside seemed just as tumultuous as his own heart. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki closed his eyes. For the first time in a while, he slept alone. Next morning, Naruto woke up before everyone else. He unsealed everyone's breakfast and placed it in the meeting room. In the meantime, he took his own breakfast and walked to the roof. There, Naruto sat on its edge and stared out into the daimyo's city. This morning, he feasted on some snacks of dried fish, stale rice, and some type of rich crackers. As the sun rose over the horizon, he thought about last night. He wondered what everyone thought of him. 1 or 2 hours of thought passed. The young man knew he couldn't keep avoiding the others forever. He, Kurenai, and Kosuke had a mission later today to investigate the palace. He wished his breakfast could last for an eternity, but it barely for even 5 minutes. He'd have to go downstairs and face everyone eventually. With a sigh, Naruto walked away from the roof. He walked downstairs and soon appeared in the meeting room. Everyone was awake, eating their food until they spotted him. It seemed everyone had some trouble sleeping. Tenten and Kurenai's hair looked messed up, Kosuke constantly rubbed his eyes, and Shino was a bit harder to tell, but he was a little slower than usual. Then there was Ayam. Naruto felt a little guilty from the bags under her eyes. Unfortunately, the silence made it hard for him to say anything. He discarded his trash. He then faced Kurenai and Kosuke. "When will you guys be ready to go?" he asked, his voice notably uneven. His question seemed to break everyone from their gaze. "Look, Naruto, about last night. We didn't. When are you ready to go?" Naruto asked in a way that made them all shiver. Kurenai never finished what she was going to say. She stared into the blonde's eyes and they made her lower her head down. "Give us an hour or so, Naruto-kun. We'll be ready," Kosuke then said. Naruto walked out of the meeting room and closed the door. They heard his footsteps echo down the long hallways. In the end, Ayam slammed her hands on the table. "What's wrong with all of you? Why do you keep looking at him like that, like you're scared? Naruto-kun saved our lives," she exclaimed. Tenten and Shino frowned as they looked down at their food. Kurenai and Kosuke leaned back. "We're not scared, Ayam. If anything, we're just too amazed. I've been a shinobi for a long time. I've served under the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Hokage. All of them have done amazing things, things I thought I'd never see. But I've never seen what Naruto-kun could do, and that was just with simple chakra paper. Even worse, we don't know what that means," Kosuke answered. "Then you should all be working to figure it out instead of isolating Naruto-kun. Even I was amazed. Even I messed up. I should have gone after him immediately. He would have done it for me," she said as she put her head in her hands. Shino took a drink. "Regardless of how we feel about him, we need him to survive. We wouldn't be eating right now if it wasn't for him," he said. "Yeah," Tenten remarked, which made the group fall into silence again. Breakfast ended with that. Kurenai and Kosuke got dressed to go out along with Naruto. They grabbed their headsets, kunai and shuriken sets, and their garbs to protect against the harsh weather. Everyone gathered on the rooftop of the building. Naruto handed Ayam the headsets for those who'd be staying. "We'll keep you updated as we move through the palace," he said. Ayam slowly nodded. "And we'll look out for your back," she replied. The blonde didn't respond to her reply. Instead, he placed his headset in his ear and stepped on the rooftop edge. "Let's go," he said. The female former Jonin and eternal genin nodded. "Naruto-kun," Ayam called out. He turned to her. "Be safe," she said. The Uzumaki heir turned his head away before his face could break apart in shame. That kindness and pity were so welcoming, they actually hurt. "Right," he said as he sucked in his legs and dashed off. Everyone gasped when they saw the 2 deep grooves he made on the roof floor. "Wish us luck. Never hurts in times like this, Maribo," she said. The 2 former genin and the ramen waitress nodded and waved them off. Both shinobi raced off to catch up with their young blonde leader. It didn't take long for them to catch up to Naruto. Personal feelings aside, the 3 entered the type of professionalism meant for their career. They entered the streets. It was quiet. The sandstorm from yesterday covered a few buildings in piles of sand. Surprisingly, none of them fell over in the storm. Everything seemed so still. "Team SAT, do you read?" Kurenai asked. "We read you, Team KNK. Nothing to see so far. You're clear to keep moving," Tenten answered. "Will do," Kurenai said. Naruto, with Kosuke and Kurenai behind him, spotted a piece of moving trash that rolled from one part of the street to the next. The distant creaking of a door left him oddly anxious. Memories of yesterday worried him. They worried Kosuke and Kurenai as well. So there was something out here capable of even hunting down these creatures. Dare they even ask what could do that? After some time passed, the trio made it to the daimyo's palace. Usually, the place would be filled with so many guards that it'd be impossible to attack. Now, there was just nothing. A few strings of sculpted gold, precious stone and wood, and fractured glass laid around its body. The palace oddly tilted to the side as if something heavy had crashed into it. One of the castle gates was busted down. Judging from the rust, It must have been weeks since anyone did repairs on it. They stepped through. What were once lush green pastures of land fit for gazing were not sandbeds, free for roaming lizards, spiders, and other creatures that could survive the harsh environment. As Naruto stepped over the gates, they creaked. Kurenai and Kosuke followed after him. Never did I think I'd see the day when the Fire Country's daimyo city would fall. Some always preached about the end times. Perhaps they were right after all, the elderly man said with a melancholic sigh. Indeed. It's rather sad, Kurenai answered through her face mask. Both noticed Naruto quickly ascending the long, cracked palace steps. They followed after him. It took a bit of time, but the three finally made it to the very top of the stairs. The palace's royal doors were also broken down. Their bodies were laced with claw marks. The inside of the palace was filled with darkness. We're entering. Remember, if you see anything, detail it as much as you can, SAT, Kosuke said. Understood, KNK, Shino replied from the other side before the comms grew dead. The three shinobi moved into the Fire Daimyo's palace. Naruto handed them each a flashlight. As they stepped inside, a bunch of dust covered the entrance. Kosuke slowly coughed before he swiped some of it away. Kurenai turned on her flashlight, and so did Kosuke. The palace's walls were definitely beautiful. They were lined with wonderful, torn fabric, and golden arches in certain corners. A regal, yet dirty carpet laid strewn about the floor. Naruto touched one of the arches. His eyes narrowed. He looked back at the fallen doors with narrowed eyes. Stay close to me. Let's start searching, he said. The two adults agreed. The group walked up a large flight of steps, some that most likely led to the upper sections of the palace. They then walked to the right past the door. A sea of debris lined the precious carpets. They stepped through quietly. Yet, the corridor was so quiet, so oddly foreboding, the darkness so tense, that they certainly didn't feel like they were being quiet. Whether they knew it or not, they wished they had the wind from outside back. At least it'd give them something to focus on besides this tightening darkness. Naruto stopped for a moment and opened one of the doors. Kurenai and Kosuke checked both ends of the hallway while the blonde fully opened the door. Inside was a broken table with some papers and a broken cabinet. Some of the drapes from a window were broken down and slumped over a desk. Once the blonde entered the room, the Genjutsu mistress and eternal genin followed him in. They scanned the room with their flashlights for a little while. The more they looked, the more unsettled Naruto got. In fact, his fears were confirmed when even the Kyuubi spoke. Look sharp, Kit. Something's wrong here, Kyuubi said. Uneasy, Naruto nodded. Jumpy, Naruto turned around when he thought he heard the pitter-patter of something far into the darkness. He channeled some chakra to his nose and ears. Yet, he smelled nothing and heard nothing. This doesn't make sense, Naruto said, which got the two adults looking at him. Indeed. I think we can rule out the possibility of survivors being held up here, he replied back as he shined his flashlight over the beautifully decorated, yet clawed-up walls. Kurenai stepped over some glass. Yes. This is the Fire Daimyo's palace. If there was going to be panic, this is one of the places where everyone in this city would go, she said, suddenly very worried as her thoughts began to connect together. Naruto clenched his fists. The doors were broken down, claw marks were on them. If this is where people were likely to go, then whatever broke the doors down got inside. If it did, then where are the bodies? The former genin questioned, a deep sense of dread running through him. There's not even any blood from a would-be attack. It's almost like a ghost town, the wrinkled man returned to them both. Naruto kicked some glass out of the way and snorted. Let's save the speculations for when we're done, Databeo. We don't know what happened here. We'll keep looking for now. Maybe we're just overreacting cause of the claw marks. The wind could have knocked the doors down, and a beast crawled through. The winds were that strong in Konoha, I guess, he said. Though both shinobi knew the blonde was only saying that to make them feel more at ease, they took it for what it was worth. As the two stepped out of the room, Naruto heard something move. He shined his flashlight in the corner. He saw a small fly on the wall. He also saw a cockroach skitter from the harsh light and hide in a corner. He oddly noticed traces of green chakra flowing through them both. Something wrong? Kurenai asked. The blonde turned around. Those bugs had green chakra, he said as he walked out of the room. Kurenai and Kosuke examined the bugs for a moment in surprise but quickly moved away. They closed the door behind them. As the trio ventured through the fire daimyo's palace, the more they moved, the more unsettled they got. Everything seemed to be in utter disarray. Rooms and furniture in one room were crushed and broken into the next. Even one of the daimyo's bedrooms was broken down into another place. Naturally, Naruto sealed up the mattress and the sheets. However, as they moved, Naruto began to smell something that he hadn't smelled before. He smelled something moldy, rotting, and decaying. It didn't smell like what a human body would smell like. All the same, it did make him nearly lose his breakfast. The same was no different for Kurenai and Kosuke. The three pulled up their face masks as they ventured up. The reason they ventured up was because the lower floors had collapsed in on themselves. To be honest, they were surprised the palace was even standing. When they made it to one of the upper floors, they were met with another hallway, and this one confirmed their fears. Kosuke knelt down and picked up a waistcloth with the fire symbol etched into it. He saw 6 of them laying across the open hallway. Hundreds of broken kunai, shuriken, and torn scrolls surrounded them. These cloths, they're the waistcloth for the 12 guardian ninja, he stated. The shinobi who protect the daimyo. I heard Asuma was one of them, Kurenai said, to which Kosuke nodded. Yes, it's a most prestigious role, but also one wrought with danger. It seems something attacked them, returned. Kurenai and Naruto moved their flashlight around, but they saw nothing. Well, the Genjutsu mistress didn't. For the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, he saw another fly. His frown deepened. So if 6 are here, then where are the other 6? Naruto asked. Ah, the question of the hour. Kosuke offered a silence prayer to the deceased warriors. The 3 then continued slowly, constantly updating Team SAT with what they found. Clearly, the news started to unnerve them all. Tenten actually suggested for them all to just get out of there and come home. Hell, that was starting to sound like a good idea. It was only when Naruto, Kurenai, and Kosuke made it to the very top of the palace that the Genjutsu mistress turned her head and retched into the wall. The eternal genin's blood ran cold while Naruto, and even Kyuubi, stared in horrific shock. I think we know what happened to the other 6, Naruto said as he stared at the green, puss-like eggs growing in the stomachs of 5 men and 1 woman. Their eyes illuminated the darkness with a dark green hue like those of a firefly. The bodies silently twitched and spasmed while their lifeless eyes stared at nothing. Their skin had been sewn to the wall and in different corners, more eggs growing from their neck and the side of their face. All 3 saw a fly exit one of their mouths. It flew towards the ceiling. Team K&K filled it with their flashlights. Once they looked up, their eyes widened again. What they saw could only be described in one word. Hell. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.